Hi folks, Dave Schmidt here. It's the morning of January 15th. I want to give you a little bit of a preview of what I'm going to talk about on tonight's radio program. But last week, I talked about the bigger picture, the global currency reset. Well, this week I'm going to continue that theme, the bigger picture, but I'm going to talk about the global currency collapse. What is it that's really going on here? What is it that's taking place all around the world? And obviously, all of us that are invested in the dinar and the dong, we have one overriding question. When is this going to happen? And why does there seem to be the continued delays after delay after delay with some of the different blog reporters that are taking place? Let me say this. When it comes down to the reality of the dinar reset, the dinar revalue, you always have to come down to one bottom line question. Who's going to foot the bill? Who's going to come up with the trillions and trillions of dollars that are necessary to pay for this revalue? There are so many different opinions out there on the blog sites, the reporters that come forward. A lot of it is really good information, and a lot of it, well, I'll let you to determine that for yourself, because some of it is just downright crazy with some of the things that they have to say. Here's how I look at it. In my estimation, if they aren't addressing in some way or another that bottom line question of who's going to foot the bill, then it's just a bunch of chatter. And that's how I look at it. I look at it, most of it is just chatter. It's a lot of gossip, and all it does is create a bunch of anxiety, fear, worry, concern, frustration, and anger that doesn't help at all. There is an overriding plan on both sides. Now, what I talk about both sides is you can go back almost 250 years and you can trace that there is a ruling group, a powers that be group of people. They are given various names. Some of them call them the Illuminati. Some of them call them the New World Order. I refer to them as the Cabal. Others refer to them as the banking cartel. They have always had one overriding goal: to control the world, to be dominant in their power and their control over us, the masses. And they have done that. Now, you may be thinking I'm into a bunch of conspiracy thinking when I'm saying this. But here's what's interesting. Their ability to work toward their goal has always lied in the power of two areas. Number one, secrecy. Keep all of this information out of the hands of the masses. Keep it as secret as possible. And number two, generate chaos and fear within the masses. I'm going to talk about this in the book that I'm writing, and it's going to be some months before that book comes out. But I talk about how fear, the energy of fear, how it can dominate our lives, and literally what it does, it shuts down the mind, the process, the creativity, the ability to see, and the ability to perceive. When the individual is in a mindset of fear, then you allow someone else to control you. And it's a subconscious control, and it's also referred to in various religious documents as being asleep. It means you're not really awake. You're not really aware of what's going on around you. When you do that collectively, when you have literally billions of people in that situation, you have the ability to control them and keep them under a sense of power. There has been that cabal that has been their goal. Their goal is world dominance. Their goal is a one world government. And if you think this is a bunch of conspiracy thinking, then I have to say, wake up. The evidence is overwhelming, but you're not going to find the evidence in the mainstream media. Why? Because the cabal controls the mainstream media. I'm going to refer you to a document that is absolutely one of the best that has ever been done. And it's in PDF book form, and it's called Financial Tyranny, and it's by David Wilcock. It was finished about 2 years ago. Now, you aren't going to find it out there in the marketplace. You're going to have trouble if you Google it. You're going to be able to it's going to take you one place to another. But here's what you do. You go to his website, divinecosmos.com. David Wilcock, divinecosmos.com. And even in there, you have to go into the search. And it's not all that easy to find it. I don't know why he does that, but here's what it is. It's in 2 parts, and there are 10 sections. The first part has 6 sections. The second part has 4 sections. This is a huge document, folks. You aren't going to read this overnight. It is over 500 pages on a Microsoft Word format. So it's quite long. Now, it doesn't read like 500 pages because there's a lot of white space and a lot of pictures and stuff like that. It reads as a book that's probably about 200 to 250 pages. But he documents, footnotes, interviews, records, and researches everything. This is a compilation of research that he has worked on for more than 10 years. It is documented to the hilt. He starts back in the 1700s with the history of the cabal, rising up through first what was called, the Freemasonry movement, and the issue of the rise of the Rothschilds family, which is the most powerful, wealthy family in the world as far as finances. He shows the rise of the Freemasonry movement, how out of that comes the Illuminati group, and from that even comes the formation of the Federal Reserve 100 years ago here in the United States. Now here's what a lot of people in the United States don't really know, or if they do know it, they're not quite able to get their hands around this. The Federal Reserve has the power to print money at will. They control the money supply, not only in the United States, they control the money supply around the world, either directly or indirectly. The Federal Reserve is not, and I'm going to repeat this again, they are not a government agency. They are a private corporation that is predominantly run by 4 families that control the central banks all around the world. They control the world's money supply. David Wilcock does a masterful job of laying this out if you want to read this for yourself. And you will see this. When you read this, you're going to come away shocked. Now, why is this important? The cabal's goal has been to keep the masses of the human race, the 7 billion of us on this planet, in what is called a financial slavery. They have done that in predominantly 2 ways. About 60% of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. The other 40% of us, we live in various forms of economic middle class to lower middle class status. So we get to live what is called a nominal nice lifestyle, but we're still in slavery. We're in slavery to our jobs, or we're in slavery to debt. And because we are not free to pursue the passions of our heart, the desires of our heart, and what we really would like to do. We're not free with our time. We're not free with our money. We have to work our jobs, and that becomes a form of slavery that keeps us asleep. And as long as we are asleep, and as long as they have the power of secrecy, and as long as they have the power to generate fearful events, then they keep that control. And they've been working on that and wanting to do that for centuries. Well, guess what, folks? It's all changing. Why is it changing? Because we, the human race, the masses, the billions, we're beginning to wake up. And how are we waking up? Fear, one of the ways you generate fear is to keep people in ignorance. If you don't know something, it has a tendency to generate fear within you. And it keeps you in that position of being, quote, in slavery, being asleep. What is changing? Well, David Wilcock, in his book, he lays out how there are about 1,400 corporations around the world that control and generate about 80% of the global money and wealth around the world. But when you dig that deeper, it takes it down to about 140 corporations really control the rest of them. And when you take that one step deeper, there are about 40 corporations here in the world that have a direct or indirect control on 80% of the money generated around the world. And when you look at who sits on those boards of directors and who those CEOs are, you find an interlinking chain that they control these corporations, they control what takes place within our world, they sit on the Federal Reserve boards at the various Federal Reserve banks and branches around the country, they sit on the Bank of International Settlements, they sit on the International Monetary Fund, and they sit in the World Bank. All of those are intertied with each other. And here's what they control: the world's money supply. They own and control the vast majority of the world's media for both news and entertainment. One of the predominant families in there is the Rockefeller family. It was the Rockefeller family that started and funded the National Education Association, the teachers union. The teachers union around the country is the largest union in the world. They have indirect control of the education system here in the United States. In those 40 corporations are some of the largest medical and pharmaceutical companies in the world. The American Medical Association was financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. So here's what you're seeing. They control money, they control media and both news and entertainment, they control the education system, they control the medical system. And on top of that, they control the political system through the finances of their campaigns that they do. So you begin to see that they have an absolute grip on control and everything that is going on. Now, the Federal Reserve, the cabal, they have always wanted to have a fiat money system around the world. Why? Because they can control the world's money supply through a fiat money system. If you go into an asset-backed currency system, they lose control because they can't control the gold all around the world. So what have they done? They have always attempted, and they are controlling the world's gold supply. What they do, they manipulate the gold market, which manipulates the stock market, and they manipulate that by limiting the amount of gold that is available on the market. If you take the vast majority of the gold and take it off market, then nobody has access to it. Then that means you can't develop what would be asset-backed currencies, gold-backed currencies, if there's a limited amount of gold available on the market to do that, because then no one country can corner the gold market. As long as they have a fiat currency, they can print up money at will, they can control what goes on. It is always been their goal, their desire, to have a global currency collapse. Now let's step back a little bit. We've seen economic cycles over the last couple of centuries, the booms and the bust cycles. But the biggest one we had, obviously the early one, was the Great Depression in the early 1930s. When you do your work, when you do your research, when you look at what goes beyond what we have been told in our education systems and in our history books, when you get to the real bottom of it, you see it was a deliberately generated collapse. It put millions, hundreds and thousands, and if not a billion people around the world into an economic slavery. But what happened in that, the global elite, the cabal, became super wealthy. It generated billionaires. They did that to control. If you control the world's money supply, the vast majority of the people become poor in economic slavery when a very small percentage becomes super rich and wealthy. The power of control. This cycle continued. It continued into the point to where what we saw was the collapse again on a cycle later in 2008. We had the real estate bubble, which created tons and tons of debt for people not only in the United States, but in most of the European countries and in Japan around the world. In most of the G8 countries, the people who owned real estate had gone deeply in debt with their real estate. They had a small bubble where they had a lot of money, and then the collapse came. And that collapse came in September of 2008 with the fall of Lehman Brothers. And what happened in 6 months? The stock market, the Dow Industrial Average, fell 53% in 6 months from September of 2008 to March of 2009. And when we saw that collapse, we saw people lose 30%, 40%, 50% of their retirement funds. We saw people who had homes that the value of their homes would drop 30% to 50% over a couple of years. We had tens of millions of people who are underwater in their homes. We saw foreclosures go into all kinds of records. We saw bank collapses. Well, guess what, folks? It was the same exact thing again. It was a designed financial collapse. As millions and millions of people moved further in debt, further into financial slavery, there was a small percentage of billionaires that were created out of that collapse. There were people that became super wealthy through that. Once again, they are wanting now to have the global currency collapse. And folks, this isn't just hypothetical thinking. This isn't just some conspiracy thinking. This is something that's really developing and really taking place. Very, very credible people are beginning to step up and say, this is a reality, this is going to happen. A lot of it starts with a gentleman by the name of Ben Fulford. Ben Fulford used to be the senior editor of the Asian Bureau of Forbes magazine. Obviously, he had lots of financial contacts all around the world, lots of very strong financial contacts in Asia. Ben turned into a whistleblower. Ben will tell you and give you the details of everything that is building up in here. Now, do I agree with everything that Ben says? No. I filter through it just as I do a lot of the others. But he is an excellent source. The second source I told you is David Wilcock with his book Financial Tyranny. And then there's, in the last few months, 6 months to a couple months, there's been a couple of new ones that are very, very credible people that have come forward. One is Karen Hudes, Hudes. Go into YouTube and you can do a search on her name. You'll find 5 to 7 different YouTube interviews. For 20 years, Karen was the legal counsel to the World Bank. She basically had access to every financial minister in over 180 countries around the world. Karen has turned into a whistleblower. She will tell you the absolute corruption of the Federal Reserve, the absolute corruption of the World Bank and the Bank of International Settlements. And she will tell you it is the cabal's desire to create a global currency collapse. And the latest one is who I talked about last week in a new interview that came out last week with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Again, you can do a Google search on him. You can do a YouTube search on him. Dr. Roberts was the Assistant Treasury Secretary in the Reagan administration. Now, before you think Ronald Reagan and you think Republican, please get over that. This is a very, very balanced man. You can go into Wikipedia and you can do a search on him and you can look at his resume. He was the father of the Reaganomics. He was the head of every economic policy during the Reagan administration. He actually believed in all that, but he was there to serve. And if you think he was just Republican-oriented, then you need to turn around and take a look at the fact that he called for the impeachment of George Bush because George Bush lied to us about the reason that we went into Iraq. Now, here are 2 very credible people that are given irrefutable evidence of the fact that it is the desire of the Federal Reserve, it is the desire of the cabal to lead us into a global currency collapse. They want all the money to collapse. David Wilcock brings this up in his book Financial Tyranny. Let's go back to 2008. When the banks were saying we need to be bailed out, they were too big to fail, and the U.S. government came up with $800 billion to bail out these big banks, the public was irate, upset, totally incensed with the fact that we would bail these banks out. Well, here's what you didn't hear. Shortly after that, within months after that, the Federal Reserve printed up $26 trillion. You heard me correctly. $26 trillion. You didn't hear about it in the news. You didn't see it hardly anywhere. The Federal Reserve had never been under an audit in their close to 100 years of history. But it was like pulling teeth, and there were a couple of congressmen that were able to get the Federal Reserve into an audit. Congressman Ron Paul and Senator Bernie Sanders. And when they did that audit, it displayed the fact that the Federal Reserve had printed up $26 trillion, given it to banks and individuals all around the world. Did you just capture what I just said? The public was incensed over $800 billion, but they weren't informed about $26 trillion. Why? Because the cabal controls the news supply. They control the world's money supply. Because they know the printing of this currency will create one of 2 things. It will create a global collapse, or it will create a hyperinflation, which leads to a collapse. That's their goal. That's what they're working toward. That's why we're seeing the battle that's going on with the delays. Now, that's what you would call the dark side. Let's take now a look at the other side. What's happening? I think there's a bigger picture of what's happening. It's called the human race. Those of us who live here on this planet, we're waking up. We're becoming alert. We're becoming awake. We can't be kept in the dark anymore. The internet has allowed us to talk to each other, like me talking here to you. Do you think you would find this information in the history books, being taught in the schools, being available through the mainstream media? No way, when it's controlled by the cabal. But they can't control the internet. They can't control you and me talking to each other. They can't control us doing our own research and bringing information out. That's what's changing. And I come back to what I talked about earlier. The power of human thought is extremely important. I'm not going to go into detail on this here, but there are so many different books that are coming out. And folks, again, this isn't hypothetical woo-woo thinking. This is based in solid research in science and medicine. They can now determine how the human thought creates an electromagnetic wave of energy that goes out into the etheric, into the atmosphere, and it creates a consciousness. Fear is the most demoralizing, powerful, demeaning thought that we can have. It's very low based in energy. Positive thinking based in love, compassion, and forgiveness changes everything. There is an awakening process that is going on. And the awakening process starts when you begin to realize and admit to yourself, oh, this isn't what I have always thought. This isn't what I have been taught. This isn't the way that it's always been. It's back to the statement that Jesus says, the truth sets you free. When you start facing into the truth, when you begin to admit the truth, when you begin to take it in yourself, your thought process begins to change. That brings about a change in the collective consciousness in the human race. Have you seen any of this in the news? That there are literally scores of countries all around the world that are having massive protests against their governments, most of it because of the financial situations and the corruption taking place in their governments. Folks, this is no small thing. You notice you never see this in the mainstream media, but it's coming out all over the place in Facebook postings. There's so many countries I can't even begin to list them all. You see the pictures of the massive gatherings of hundreds of thousands of people that are gathering in the streets of their large cities and the capitals of their country, protesting what's going on in the government. The masses can't be stopped. You always see the massive changes in history come about because the masses wake up. One of the best examples was the movement by Mahatma Gandhi in India and how the masses, the 300 million people in India, woke up and they basically said to the 100,000 controlling British people in their country, you're not going to control us anymore. Did it take time? Yes, it took time. But this is an awakening and a movement that is developing all around the world. That's why I believe what is happening is very positive for us. Now, let me come back to the original question that I always say. Who's footing the bill? Who's paying for this? If we want to see what is the revaluation of our currencies take place, if we look at the current economic status, the current financial condition of what is available in the current, on the books, and all the banks and bank accounts around the world, there isn't enough money there to finance a global currency reset with the dinar at $30 and the dong at somewhere between $3 and $7. That money just does not exist. It's not out there. Even with the dinar at $3.50 and the dong at 47 cents, it's still hard to see in the current situation that much money being available because there are now trillions and trillions of dinar that have been printed up. There is a possibility at $3.50 with the oil credit situation with China and the trillions of dollars of China holds in U.S. bonds that could pay for a dinar revaluation at $3.50 to $4. But guess what, folks? That's still fiat money. It's fiat money. It's not asset-backed currencies. There's only one place that money exists, and that's with the Dragon family in China. Now you're probably hearing my phone ringing in the background, so hold on here just a second as I can turn my phone off, okay? The only place that amount of money exists, and you notice you will never see that coming out of the mainstream media and the news information sources. But the evidence is overwhelming that it's there. David Wilcock just touches the tip of the iceberg of what's available that's out there. This has all been a part of a greater, bigger picture that's been developing for millenniums. When the human race wakes up, when they move out of their financial slavery and move into a position, and I want to use the biblical metaphor of moving into the promised land, that's when this money is going to be released. And it's about ready to happen. The battle is there. The cabal wants the global currency collapse. What stops a global currency collapse? A global currency reset backed by assets. But the asset doesn't have to be just gold. It can be bananas in Ecuador. It can be rice in Vietnam. It can be oil that's in Iraq. It can be wheat that's here in the United States, because we are the largest wheat producer in the world, the second largest commodity, food commodity in the world. Rice is number one. China is the largest rice producer. Vietnam is the second largest rice producer. That's the largest food commodity in the world. It's a commodity that has value in its asset. And when you do that, and then you release the thousands of trillions of dollars of gold, that's what stops the collapse. And we're building up to that point. There are reports that some of this money is already being released. I believe that. Now, can I give you absolute accuracy and documentation? No, I can't, because it's being kept quiet, because if it gets released too soon, it creates what is called a panic and fear all around the world. I was told you this, and I had said this. There are sting operations that are going on to basically neuter the cabal folks. They have to be neutered. I absolutely believe the Dragon family is not going to release their gold until these people are neutered, because they have to come to the point where their power is neutered. Does that mean they're all going to be arrested and taken off the streets? Not necessarily. Does that mean that they're all going to resign from Congress, the evil ones? The dark ones, the bad ones? Not necessarily. But it does mean that their power has to be neutered. And how is their power neutered? You go into the money becomes asset backed, and you release literally, and you create millions of everyday working folk, new millionaires, that takes this money and spreads it into an absolute economic explosion all around the world. You fund projects that rebuild the world, put money into third world countries to give them running water, good homes and habitat, food so that they aren't starving and they can live a nominal life. You pump this money into this types of development all around the world, and it comes from the masses. And that's what breaks the back of the cabal. We are right at this breaking point, this climactic point between the battle of those two sides. How much longer is this going to go on? I don't know. I have reports it could change next week, but yet it still could take another couple of years. When David Wilcock was reporting on this 2 years ago, they were anticipating it was going to happen. I think they missed a couple of things. They missed that how the money was going to be dispersed. And you have heard me say, the global currency reset, the revaluation of the currencies, is only the first step. But there's multiple steps in all this. But yes, it allows us to be able to take our masses and be compassionate with our money. We are seeing a change in the human consciousness. The energy of the old paradigm of greed and power and control with money is going away, and we are moving into a new paradigm of love and compassion and caring with our wealth. That's our responsibility. This isn't about just you and me and a small percentage of us becoming overnight millionaires so we can be greedy with our money. Underneath all of that is the importance of what is the consciousness of the human race. And we are changing. We're changing very rapidly. We're moving into a new sense of consciousness. Look around you. Feel what's going on around you. Be aware. We're moving into a new intuitive age. An age where we sense and understand that there's more to our world than what we experience in our 5 physical senses. There is so much more that is out there. But to bring about that change means we have to be a people who are ready to change. Not only are we ready to change, we have done our work to be responsible with the change. There's a global currency collapse that the cabal wants to have happen. They are making every attempt, every last ditch effort to bring that about. I personally believe that's not going to happen because there's going to be a global currency reset that's going to stop it. There are multiple sources backing up what I am saying. So folks, this is the bigger picture. This video was a little longer. If you want to share this video with others, I'd say go ahead, go out and do it. I'm going to be talking about this on the radio program tonight, my January 15th radio program. We'll go into more depth about it. Normally what I do on the radio program for the first 45 minutes to an hour, I will talk just as I've done here. And then I open it up for your questions and your comments to have discussion on that. As always, I want to thank you very much. I am dependent upon your support until that happens. If not, I'm going to have to go back and get another job. I would rather not have to do that. I love what I'm doing here. We need to be a little more patient, but it's coming, folks. It is coming. The evidence is building. The reports are building. We're not far away. Thank you very much. Love all of you. Okay, bye-bye.